Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode on self-awareness. Hi, I want to say hi to my lovely partner in crime, Serena. How you doing, lovely?
Partner in crime, I love that. Love it. I'm good, thank you. Thank
um,
you. How are things your way?
yeah, they're great. I'm actually really looking forward to talking about self-awareness because
Hmm.
we get a bit of woo in this, and I don't mind a bit of woo.
Would you, as I say, yeah, we could absolutely. So when I looked at this episode coming up that we decided to kind of focus on this, I thought, wow, there's so many ways we can go with this conversation. I mean, even if you just say self-awareness, I mean, if I said that to you, what is self-awareness to you? How would you describe that for yourself?
It's a connection to myself. So without self-awareness, I don't feel connected. I feel really disconnected, actually. So it's a connection to my innermost thoughts, feelings, wishes, wants, desires, values, beliefs. It's knowing what they all are. But predominantly, I think I'm actually, because I'm doing a course at the moment on holding space, and one of the things that what we have to do is make friends with silence.
Mm.
And so often in this very noisy, distracted world that we live in, silence is like the last precious resource. There are very few absolutely silent places on planet Earth. They're getting fewer and fewer and fewer. I'm reading an article actually called The Last Quiet Place. And so, just like being able to access silence and the power within that, like the presence within that, for me feels very important and a big part of self-awareness, because I think like awareness is like almost consciousness projecting forward into your life. And I think we become very distracted by phones and goals and all of this stuff, the external stuff, and we forget to actually just sit and be aware that we are aware. It's that weird sort of meta thing, being aware of our awareness, to remember that we we are a being that has awareness. That in itself is important to remember frequently, I would say.
Love that.
What
So,
about you? What about you?
well, so for me, this is the ultimate place to get to, really. And the way when I teach this, although I think it's probably one of the most important things to get your head around and to cultivate, because having self awareness is the game changer, basically. Um, it's not something I go into great detail about because it can become a very esoteric, as we've touched upon there, conversation. For me, the way I describe this when I teach it is I talk about becoming the observer. And I talk about that being the most powerful place that you can be in your life is when you can become the observer of your life. And I mean that on both a macro and a micro scale. So when I just think this is, if you can cultivate this as a practice to become the observer in your own life. So what that looks like is to be able to observe who you are, as you've alluded to, from that place that sounds very meta. Who am I being in this situation? Almost as, and I notice that when I describe it, and people can't see this obviously on a podcast, but if you're watching this on YouTube, you can. Is I always pull my hands away and I kind of show, what I'm showing is a hand above my other hand, and one is like a little satellite version of yourself that is able to view how you are behaving, how you are feeling, how you are acting in that moment, and to be able to, with that self-awareness, respond in a way that honors who you are. And there are practices and things that we can do to cultivate that and to nurture that, which again
Yeah.
I believe is probably the most important. I think it's the work of being here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is. It's very spiritual. It
Mm.
connects us to who we are. It connects us to our sense of why we are here as well. So you're getting into philosophy, you're getting into spirituality or religion, whatever you believe. But I like that what you did with your hands. I have something similar that I put into my hypnosis scripts if people are struggling with feelings. So a lot of the time, people come to me because they're dissociated or they're disconnected from feelings. They can't hold down relationships, and they can't. Ultimately, it's because they can't handle their feelings because their feelings are uncomfortable, and so they separate from them. Um, but I teach them this thing where you can, like, it's safe for you to get back into your body, providing you have that, you separate yourself from the sensation, so you can feel the sensations of the feeling, but you can also observe yourself feeling the sensations of the feeling. So I imagine it like a bridge. On one side of the bridge is you in the feeling, and on the other side of the bridge is you looking at that version of you, just
Mm,
completely neutral. So not
mm,
attaching your sense of self-worth, any sense of like identity with that. It's sort of like in the, as Eckhart Tolle would say, like the formless part of you,
mm,
the part
mm.
of you that is sort of in the ether, you know?
Yeah, I
I mean, that
think
might
it's
seem a bit,
no. It seems totally. I mean, this is right up my alley, as you well know. It's probably one of the reasons that we're friends, is we kind of connect on that level. Certainly for me, that spiritual level, because for me, it also relates to having that spiritual view. Um, I think it's important for anyone listening that is a therapist or psychologist or who works in that area, just to say as a massive disclaimer, that we're not talking about cultivating dissociation, that this is very, very different, that this is not dissociating from the self. This is actually becoming more fully aware of the self, but being able to remove ourselves, if you like, from, as you've said, the attachment to being a particular way. And for me, one of the things that is game changing for this is when we have this ability to become the observer, to have this sense of awareness, is you have more stake in the game. You are able to craft your life in a way that actually serves and helps, and you get to think more mindfully about how you want to show up in the world. So what is it that you want to do? How do you want to make a difference? And that might look like, very simply, you not responding to things angrily. It
yeah,
might be as simple as that. It might be that you realize you're a very angry person, and cultivating the sense of becoming the observer and the self-awareness that we're talking about is, and again, a big part of this conversation for me is I talk about slowing everything right down, to not respond so quickly, to slow it down, to allow yourself and to give yourself the space to become the observer. It gives you a moment where you get to then choose. And remember, this is all about behavior change. So we're talking about you being able to consciously choose who you want to be in the world. And
yeah.
that's why this feels so profound. And again, I don't know how you relate to that.
I really relate to that. Because I think that's the power of it. We're talking about the power to choose, and you can only choose which direction you want to go in if you have conscious awareness of it. Otherwise, you're going to be at the mercy of those or unconscious drivers that are driving you to drink, driving you to smoke, driving you to get angry or act out your anger. There's nothing wrong with anger, but if it's sort of coming out like a volcano that's just been suppressed under the crust of the earth, it's going to explode. So if we are self-aware, we get a sense of that anger before it gets misdirected in the wrong way.
Mm,
I also wrote this little metaphor down that it helps. I've got a songwriting degree, so I always say it helps to know what the notes are that you are creating the music with. Now, of
mm,
course, you can create music without knowing what the notes are. You can play intuitively. But if you actually want to craft a number one hit, you have to know what the notes are. You have to know what the chords are that you're playing. You have to know how all of the instruments are going to affect each other in the arrangements. So we are playing life, right? We're here on this earth and we've got a shot at, playing life as in playing an instrument. And if you're playing at life, you've got to know how your instrument, your body, your mind, your soul actually works. So you've got to
Mm.
break it all down. Like when we go to music college, you have to break it all down. I never knew the purpose of arrangement analysis. I was like, why are we doing this? Counting the beats in the introduction, looking at where the bass drum goes, looking at what the type of guitar riff is, how that's interacting with the vocal. All of that stuff, I recognize that now in life too. You have to be able to know, again, beliefs, values, goals, self-awareness, habits. All of that is part of playing the instrument of life. Your body, your mind, your soul is the instrument.
That's very, very poetic, Sally. I thought you were going to actually sing it to us at one point. I was very much looking forward to that. And I love
That's
that
the next episode.
yeah, definitely. We'll have to get you singing definitely at some stage. Um, I love that, and it definitely resonates for me in terms of what you're saying, and certainly in the way that I teach this as well. So very aligned in terms of that description, because I talk about kind of this physical body and the soma.
Mm-hmm.
So again, being grounded in the somatic, because we are grounded in the somatic, and everything starts with how we feel. So having to become attuned to that is kind of where it starts. But the power of thought and being able to then, as you've kind of said, choose the notes we play, choose how we respond, choose who we want to be and how we want to show up is for me, it's the unlock, really. It's a great place to be. And again, what I'm really aware of, and I think you said something about this at the start, when you talked about your training and you're looking at kind of being in quiet places and being with silence, it's one of the exercises I often give people as a means to try and tap into that, is just to find the quiet, is to have a time when you don't have any even music on in the background, there's nothing to fill your space, so that you do become in tune with and you get to hear your own voice. And what I'm very aware of as I'm saying that is that will be very, very, very confronting for some people.
Yeah.
And I meet people all the time who they never are with that voice, and they find it very frightening to even kind of sit and be with that voice,
Yeah.
to be with themselves. Essentially, it's very, very difficult to sit and just be with yourself, which again does sound, if anyone's tuning in at this point, it definitely sounds like we're woo-woo podcast number one. To be with yourself. And again, you mentioned, so one last thing, you mentioned Eckhart Tolle, because this actually goes back to the beginnings of his teachings in The Power of Now, when he said that his transformation came from the fact that he was feeling very suicidal. And the thing that really woke him up was he listened to the voice, and the voice said, I cannot live with myself. And he realized that there were almost two voices there. Who was the I that could not live with, and myself, who
The
could not live with
self.
myself? Who was the self? And so
Yeah.
actually I think we're unraveling something here that's really quite profound, and for me feels at the very heart of any change you want to make, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the I feels like the awareness, just the part of you that sits back there, and then the self feels like the smaller self, the personality, the body, the one that has the habits, the behaviors, all of those things. But the person that's a little bit back from that is the observer, and that's the one to tune into. And you can only tune into that if there's silence. But I think that people often get worried. I remember this one time I was giving someone a singing lesson, and I always start with breathing exercises. It was ages ago. It was this guy that was really jacked up on stress. And I got him to lay on the floor and do some breath work. And the minute he lay down, took one breath and jumped back up again, could not
Mm,
sit, could not be with himself at
mm,
all. And that interests me because I think, what are you running away from? Like,
mm,
you're running away from yourself, all those thoughts and feelings that you have. It's like you're not allowed, they're not allowed to be, all the darkness that might be under there, you know, the shame or the humiliation or the not feeling good enough. All of that sort of comes to the surface, and that has to be dealt with when you're in silence. And so,
yeah.
yes, it can be a very difficult place to be for some people, to feel those feelings, especially if you've never really been taught how to deal with difficult emotions. If as a child you were emotionally bypassed, perhaps no one really tuned into you, perhaps you never developed a sense of authenticity. You know, that whole thing about attachment versus authenticity, how
Mm,
we as a child have to choose attachment over authenticity. And so that can often be the case, and then we just sort of end up living our lives by rote, just without really having any kind of awareness. And when we do finally sit in silence, the pain of that comes to the surface, this real disconnection from self that we haven't actually chosen. It's just all been chosen for us based on
mm,
expectations and what we think we should do with ourselves. So when the silence hits, boy, the shit can really hit the fan, I tell you. And that's why, of course, that's why people avoid it.
I think, again, I think what you're saying is so important. And I think if anyone is listening to this and identifies with that, then absolutely seek the help of a professional to help you deal with that, and to sit with someone who therapeutically can help you navigate that journey to get to a place where you're comfortable and you can recognize maybe where that comes from, and deal with it. There are other people, I think, who will listen to this who just really struggle with it, um, from a less pathological point of view, if you like, or less
Mm-hmm.
traumatic point of view. And it's those people who I think are just on the go all the time. So certainly in terms of my behaviour change model, when you look at those who I say are acquirers, and I'm an acquirer, and that simply means that your comfort zone is a place where you're acquiring the skills and the knowledge, and you like to figure out your vision before you move forward and set your goals. And my comfort zone is reading, analyzing, thinking, overthinking. So of course I'm going to be drawn to being self-aware, because I consider myself very self-aware because I do the work and I like to be in the place of that self-awareness. Whereas a performer is someone who just has to always be moving.
Yeah.
They are uncomfortable with stopping, because it's almost like they're kinetic. They have to keep moving. They have to constantly be in motion. So even if they've just got noise on in the background, that creates movement because there's a change in energy in their space. So I think there'll be some people, like I said, who've got less of a, if you like, traumatic reason, but they just can't keep still. It's like, I don't want to sit down. This is a waste of time. They're kinetic. They need to keep moving. And yet there's power in at least having enough time just to slow things down enough to know why you're in that active state all the time, to figure out what your next steps are more mindfully. And that's the kind of change that's very, very powerful for those people. Is, those people are often struggling to change something because they haven't had time to think for long enough what they really want to do or why they're doing it in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I see myself in that, actually. Not well, yeah, yeah, probably now. Well, I feel like I'm actually going through quite a big transition at the moment, into from restlessness into more
mm,
silence. And when I look back at my life, I can see how so many of the decisions I've made have been as a result of that restless energy. Trying lots and lots of things just to see if it works, just to see if it sticks. And if it doesn't, I'll move on to something else, rather than actually sitting down and looking at a model and going, right, okay, let's do the introspective work. Let's just sit and actually figure out, just in my head first, if this is going to work. I think maybe that comes down to the sort of person I am, in that I need like a visceral feeling as to whether something will work or not. It's that Marie Forleo statement that clarity comes from engagement. And
Yeah, it comes from action. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, which is
clarity comes from
true.
action.
Which is true. But I think, again, from my point of view, and I don't think it matters which comes first, because again, from my point of view, from a behaviour change process, both are needed to change. So
Yeah.
someone like me, remember, I'm great at figuring out why I should be doing something, but that is potentially the place I get stuck. I don't go beyond that. I'm an overthinker. It's not that I don't get things done. Arguably, when I have accomplished something, it's because I've acquired what I need to be able to perform that and then evolve it and then gone back to evolving the process. So I can complete the motion, but if I'm stuck, I realize I'm stuck in acquisition.
Yeah.
Whereas someone who's stuck and they're a performer, usually they're stuck in performance. They don't know why they're doing it. They're the kind of people that end up on a bandwagon. They're just doing the next thing, but they don't really know why they're doing it. They don't know how it fits into their bigger picture. They're more likely to wake up and go, what did I do that for? I've wasted a year doing that. Or I've ended up in this job. Why am I doing this? It's not really what I wanted to do. And then you say, what do you want to do? And they say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Someone like me has got loads of ideas, and then I'll read all the books about it and listen to all the podcasts and maybe, go and do another course. That's my safety zone. So,
Yeah.
but self-awareness, going back to the premise of self-awareness and the power of the observer, for me, is at the heart of all of this. It's
Yeah.
about tapping into and slowing things down enough, really just to more mindfully plot a next step that feels aligned with who you want to be in the world.
Yeah, definitely. Can I ask you a question, backtracking slightly? Do you get mentally tired with all this reading and like mental processing? And is that ever a barrier to you?
Um, no, it's where I get the most enjoyment, because it's
Yeah.
not just a safety zone, it's what I actually enjoy. So I have to be quite careful around recognizing when I've slipped into stagnation, because I really,
Okay.
it's going back to, maybe people remember from previous episodes, I definitely said that I used to take myself off for like a 2 or 3 day trip on my own to goal set for the year. Oh my God, pig and poo, absolute happy place. Give me books, give me stationery, give me time to plan and plot how I want everything to look and feel. I am there. It's one of the things that I think makes me good at what I do, is I can unravel that for other people.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, I think for me, in terms of this model and like with the model that I teach from, as I've said, all three processes are needed for true evolution. We need to acquire, to perform, to evolve the process, to keep going. So when I've accomplished something, and again, if people are listening to this and relate to it, arguably when you've accomplished something, you've actually naturally gone through that cycle of doing all of the things that are needed. You have to be in action for something to really to happen. Something actually has to happen. You have to perform the thing. But what I'm saying is, if you want to identify why you're stuck, it's a very interesting way of looking at how we can unstuck ourselves. And I know when
Yeah.
I'm stuck, I've gone too far. I'm staying now in safety zone. It's like when you go, I'll just read one more book, I'll just do one more course, I just need another qualification.
Yeah.
And that becomes the place that is beautiful because you're good at it. But so, and I'm writing my book about this obviously at the moment. I'm not trying to plug the book, by the way, but I talk about your superpower is also your kryptonite, because it's my
Ah,
super,
yes, of course.
also my weakness. So for you, your performance is your superpower, but it's also your weakness if you keep
Yeah.
doing that. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. Yeah, it really does. Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely. I can't wait to read your book.
Thank you. Just have
Sounds
to finish the
amazing.
damn book.
Oh, you will. You will. Do you think you can have too much self-awareness?
That's a really good question.
The reason I ask is because sometimes Graham, my husband, will say to me, or there'll be a disconnect because I am very self-aware, and I'm always talking about the stuff that I'm aware of, and he sort of
Mm.
like zones out sometimes. And he'll say like, oh, and he's a thinker too, but I just wonder if you can over well, it's that thing of overthinking. People say, and it does annoy me though when people say, oh, don't overthink it. You're like, do you know who you're talking to here? Yeah, like, no, go away, you horrid person.
I think
But
I
yeah,
think it's a really, really important question. So my gut reaction to that is you can't have too much self-awareness, because for me this starts to stray into, it's more about what you do with it. And so from a psychological point of view, when you're looking at things that become maladaptive or unhelpful, that's the
yeah,
cut off. It's, when that's interfering with your daily life in some way and you're finding it hard to function because of something. So I would say you have to look at that individually for you. If your self-awareness is now starting to cause issue, maybe, for example, you've unpacked something for yourself. In that case, you need to seek help for that. But ultimately, it's what you do with that and whether you find that overwhelming or not. I mean, certainly I don't find it overwhelming for myself. It's something I want to cultivate, because for me it does lead to that kind of enlightenment, really. And that's why we're here, is kind of how I relate to this, is I am here to become self-aware. And
yeah, I agree.
every day is a school day. I am becoming more self-aware as time goes on. I mean, how I respond to things and how I feel about things, still surprises me sometimes. Things still come up. I'm still learning about myself. And therefore, the more I know about myself, the more I get to decide what I do with that. And for me, it comes back to who I want to be in the world. Like, what impact am I here to make? Who am I here to help? What's my legacy? We're getting really deep now. But if in
Mm.
doing that work you unravel something that is difficult for you, that's at the point at which you need support and help, because I can't think of things that I found difficult for myself, but I find other people's lack of self-awareness probably more problematic. That's the bit I kind
Yeah,
of check. Yeah.
yeah, I have a challenge. I have challenges with that as well. And actually, yeah, sometimes I don't work with clients if they don't have enough self awareness, and I will turn clients away. You have to have a level of self awareness to do rapid transformational therapy. Otherwise, I'll get frustrated. You'll get frustrated. There's just no point. But it just reminded me of a statement by the guy who invented acceptance and commitment therapy. I
Mm,
think his book, is it Stephen Hayes? His book
mm,
is one of his books anyway. Get out of your head and into your life.
mm.
And sometimes I think we do spend too much time in our heads and not enough time in our lives. And if that is a problem, like for you, clearly that's not a problem because you enjoy that. But I think for some people where that balance is tipped and that does become a problem, then there's a question mark over whether self or more self-awareness is the right thing for them. And actually, let's cut it off. Like, no more books. Go and have a game of tennis. Go and have a game of volleyball with someone. Go and have a conversation with someone instead. So you're not up here, you're actually in more of the body or the
Ah,
somatic, or is that
amen.
different?
Amen, sister. No, and actually, you've again nicely segued into the 8 model, which is exactly what I teach. So as I said, I can get stuck in acquisition. It's my superpower. So if I'm doing it in a way that serves me, and I'm able to kind of then go into be in action and evolve the process and complete on something and know why I've done it and do it very mindfully. That's evolution in action. That's beautiful. It's when I feel stuck, I know I'm stuck there.
Yeah,
And actually, if
yeah,
I see this in a client when I was working with them, identifying who they are and who they're not is very powerful. And often what I do is, if you are like me, an acquirer, it's not just to get you into action, but also to do something deeply somatic to get you back into your body is really powerful. So, when I've been working with clients, they've been really surprised when I've done things like set them homeworks to go and start salsa dancing or do something super different, and where they're moving their body and they're becoming much more connected. So that's very aligned with what you're saying. And I think, and it comes back to actually that we are these whole and complete human beings, and nothing is in isolation. So although in this episode, obviously, we're talking very much, and as I've said, it's for me, it's the unlock, it's becoming the observer. The point of observing and the point of self-awareness is not to stay there. This is going back to behaviour change, which is the whole point of the podcast. Is what do you do with it? How is your behaviour going to change as a result of having that awareness? What do we do with that? It's a powerful tool, but there's a function of having it. And you get to be the maker of that. You get to decide what you do with that when you have self-awareness. And I
I
think
love
that,
that.
yeah, what are you going to do with this one precious self-awareness that you have? It's what the quote should say.
yeah. What are you going to do with it? And that's the beauty of it. I'm going on holiday tomorrow, and I can't wait to sit there and really tune into what is my function, the function of all this self-awareness that I have. How am I going to channel it and be of service to the world and actualize it so that it doesn't stay stagnant in like a pool of energy in my head? Because I think that's when we get that overwhelm. I know I'm quite susceptible to overwhelm, and often it can be as a result of having too much energy in the head, not being actualized out there in real life.
I think you said something that I have to pick up on, which is so important, and it might just drop us very deeply into the woo-woo if we stay there too long, but I can't not acknowledge it. And you just said, kind of this idea of staying in your head. And I think that, again, it's what we're touching upon here when you're doing this work and you're talking about what you're doing with this superpower that you can develop, which is to have this power to be the observer, is what you'll realize is if you take it as far as it can go and you think about what you'll do with the self-awareness, it is usually something to do with serving other people. It's usually about service. And if you take it really even more deeply into the woo-woo, as I said, if I were to say I was going to wave a magic wand and remove every other human being off the face of the earth and you were the only person standing on the earth, who is the observer of themselves? What is your self-awareness without any other human being here? What is that now? Because actually our self-awareness is only self-aware of who we are in relation to other people.
Wow.
Otherwise it's just awareness of what? Of where you are in space, but actually it's all about how we relate to other people.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what are you?
God, that's a bit of a head fuck, Serena. Even for me.
Well, yeah, it kind of goes back to kind of the step below that would be, I can't live with myself. And there's I and myself. Or, well, when you're self-aware of you, who are you when there is no one else there?
It reminds me of that film. That film, you'll know it with.
What?
Say that again.
I thought you were going to say it's like does a tree make a sound if it falls in the woods?
Oh yeah, it's that sort of thinking, isn't it?
In the woods. I think that's from Friends as well. Go
that
on.
film. What's it called? With Tom Hanks when he's on a desert island, he gets stranded on a desert island. Castaway, and it's just him, and he has Wilson. A football. Wilson, yeah, I've got a Wilson. I'll call it Wilson, my little comfort ball. But it's funny that kept him alive. Animating a ball, drawing a face on it and some hair, and talking to it kept him sane, kept him alive, kept him going. Otherwise, I just can't imagine that depth of isolation and solitude without having other people to interact with. I know what I'm like. If I'm on my own for too long, it does get a bit it gets a
Mm.
bit meta and weird and odd.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, and obviously in that example, I should have said all living things, because quite frankly, the best company I have is my dog. And I am something in relation to him. So yeah, obviously do with that example what you will. But yeah, the point
Yeah.
I'm making is, yeah, who are we without, this awareness that we're cultivating? What is that in relation? It's something in relation to others is what we're actually looking at. And usually you'll find is if you reduce it down, it goes beyond just the thoughts we have about ourselves. It usually translates to other people, and therefore who we want to be in relation to those people as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, you do
Yeah.
find that when you ask people these questions, why is that important? Why is it important? It often boils down to improving relationships in some way, shape, or form, or being of service,
Yeah,
because
definitely.
that's what we get. I don't know about you, but I thrive when I'm helping someone through a
Mm,
change, helping them through transitions, helping them to create better habits and just to feel better. I come away from that feeling energized, feeling meaningful, feeling like my life is fulfilled and I'm filled with purpose. And
mm.
there must be a reason for that. Well, I think we are supposed to do that. We are supposed to uplift and support each other for the survival of the species.
Yeah, I think so. Again, going back to those first episodes that we did, and I talk about the why. Even when I try and teach people and kind of cultivate that conversation, I always say that you'll find actually if you stick with that idea for long enough, your why will be about being of service to others. It comes back to what you do for other people, how you want to be in the world in relation to others, because how would you have a why on your own? What would it
Mm,
be doing? And actually, even if it doesn't appear to be of service to others, if people are actually more in ego, it might appear to be for themselves, but actually
okay.
I just think that again there's maybe more growth to happen there, that they uh once they grow and change and they kind of have a bit more time to kind of cultivate that, I think you do get to a place where it's usually about other people, because again,
Yeah.
going back to before, what else is there really? Why are you doing any of this? What's it for?
Yeah. Yeah. And I
Wow.
do think that if it's just for material gain, that, as we know, leads to unhappiness. You can have all the things, but if you've got all the things in isolation, you won't be happy. And that's pretty
Well,
much guaranteed.
yeah, and even if someone is doing something for that reason, yes, it's to be maybe have more comfort and a bigger house for you. But is it, if it's from ego, is it because you're trying to show other people that you're living a particular life, or
I see.
what is it for? There's other people involved somewhere in that chain. Is it that you want to have a bigger house for your children? That's still for other people. It's not ever really about you.
That's true. I didn't even think of it. And that reminds me of a podcast episode I was listening to with Stephen Bartlett around money, and the guy, trying to think of the name so I can reference it. Um, Morgan Housel. Funny name. Morgan Housel. He's got house in his name.
Mhm.
Um, and funny enough, the name of the episode is "Do Not Buy a House." How to
Oh.
turn £100 into 1.5 million without effort, Morgan Housel. But he talks about why you want to accrue stuff. And it's usually to impress other people or to have some kind of validation in society, because maybe you don't feel good enough on the inside. Maybe you do, but maybe you don't. And that's why, he said something like the people who have the wealthy mindset actually don't give a shit about Lamborghinis, big houses. They have what they need. They have enough. Yeah, they live in a nice house. They drive a nice car, but they don't actually. They're not motivated by those objects of
Oh,
wealth.
yeah, you take any of those things to the nth degree, what's it for? Any of them. So often if it's money and people get to a point where they have enough money or more, they often will either go into philanthropy and help other people, they're doing something for good, or it goes to power. But even power is masquerading, because what they're trying to overpower is other people.
Yeah.
Again, if you took
Yeah.
all people off the face of the earth, who are they going to be powerful to? It's just a
Yeah.
mirror to who they really are. That, again, that comes back to, that's the deeper work. The deeper work is to understand the self.
Yeah.
So
In
I would
relation.
argue in relation to others. So, and that's really what it's about. I mean, you have to do it in relation. So the self is about you. But as I said, if you trace that back, we are nothing without encountering ourselves in relation to other people eventually. So again, I think people whose ego is intact, they've done the work. I think those people that maybe gain money and finances will help other people, because that's what it enables them to do. Or some people turn to power. For me, that's a sign that they've not really done the work. Because
Yeah.
what are they doing it for? It's
Yeah.
anyway.
To overpower, to have power over others. Yeah.
Have power over others. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it still involves other people. Right, Sally, we could obviously,
Wow.
if you stuck with us through that episode, well done you. Tell us what
I
you
think
think.
I think that's one of our juiciest episodes yet.
And probably something that people wouldn't think when they think about behaviour change, hence the title, What the Bleep is Behaviour Change. So arguably we have gone quite deep there, very philosophical, quite esoteric, even spiritual, which is very much a place that I come from. You don't have to go there at this point in time if it's not comfortable for you, but I would really recommend, if you're interested, that you sit with this a bit longer and you think about it for yourself. And if you're a practitioner working with other people, this isn't a conversation that you have to have with other people. This is more of, hopefully you found this interesting.
Yeah.
And maybe there's something in this for you, because also other people's change as a practitioner also starts with who you are. So your change is also important, I would say.
Absolutely. Don't think you can help anyone with behaviour change if you're not doing the behaviour change yourself. You need that first-hand experience. And I think the more you do it, like practitioners would normally be quite interested, I would say, in this stuff for themselves, to give them a frame of reference as to why they are in the helping profession themselves. And yeah, it's a little bit of woo. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of woo. I think ultimately people are quite interested in those deeper questions.
Well, we'll find out if they write comments. Thank you. Do write comments. Tell us what you thought today. We would love to hear. Well,
Brilliant.
thanks,
All right,
Sally.
everyone.
Amazing. Yeah, love today. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. And you want to really heat your kidneys
I'm
up.
frozen. You froze.
I froze.
Went, but if you have, that's
But
what
if you
happened.
have, um, but if you're